The Valkyrie had been watching Earth for 50 years. They hid their ships behind the moon and studied the strange creatures that lived on the blue planet. The Valkyrie were not like humans. They had gray skin, 4 eyes, and long tentacles instead of arms. But their most powerful feature was invisible. They could read minds. They could push their thoughts into other beings and control them like puppets. Commander Zyrith was the leader of the invasion fleet. He stood on his ship, the Mindspire, and looked at Earth through the large window. His 4 eyes blinked one after another as he thought about what his scouts had told him. The humans have no mental powers, his second officer said. Their brains are completely alone. They cannot hear thoughts. They cannot send thoughts. They are deaf and blind in the ways that matter. Zyrith made a sound of agreement. This was good news. The Valkyrie had conquered 17 different species across the galaxy. The method was always the same. They would enter the minds of their targets, find their deepest fears, and make those fears grow until the targets could not fight anymore. It was clean. It was simple. It always worked. They build interesting machines, Zyrith said, watching a human satellite drift past his window. But machines will not save them. Prepare the invasion force. We will start with a small town to test their resistance. His officers moved quickly to obey. None of them were worried. Why would they be? Humans were primitive. They still fought wars with each other over lines on a map. They still believed in things they could not see. They still died from diseases they had not learned to cure. Taking their planet would be easy. The Valkyrie chose a town called Cider Falls. It sat in the middle of America, surrounded by farms and fields. 12,000 humans lived there. It was small enough to control, but large enough to provide good test results. 3 ships descended through the clouds on a Tuesday night. They made no sound. Their lights were dim. Most of the humans in Cedar Falls were asleep and did not see them coming. Danny Ortega was not asleep. He worked the night shift at the power plant on the edge of town. It was boring work, mostly just watching screens and drinking coffee, but it paid well and let him spend days with his daughter. She was 7 years old and thought her father was a superhero because he kept the lights on for the whole town. Danny stepped outside to stretch his legs. The night air was cool and smelled like rain. He looked up at the sky and saw something that made him freeze. 3 massive shapes were coming down through the clouds. They were not planes. They were not helicopters. They were something else entirely. He should have run. He should have called for help. He should have done something. But Danny just stood there, coffee cup in hand, watching the impossible become real. Then something hit him. It was not a physical blow. Nothing touched his body. But inside his head, Danny felt something pushing, pressing, trying to get in. It was like a headache and a nightmare combined. He dropped his coffee cup and grabbed his skull with both hands. Commander Zyrith smiled as he made contact with the human's mind. He pushed his consciousness forward, ready to find the simple fears of a simple creature. He expected to see darkness, maybe some childhood terror, perhaps a worry about money or health. He would grab that fear and twist it until the human collapsed. What Zyrith found instead was something he had never experienced in 300 years of mental warfare. The human mind was a storm. Thoughts crashed into each other like waves. Memories swirled in circles that had no beginning and no end. Emotions burned so bright that Zyrith had to shield himself from their heat. The human was afraid, yes, but he was also curious. He was worried about the alien ships, but he was also thinking about his daughter. He was terrified, but somewhere deep inside, he was also excited. How could one mind hold so many things at once? Zyrith tried to focus on the fear. That was his weapon. That was his tool. But every time he grabbed the fear, it slipped away, replaced by something else. The human was remembering his daughter's laugh. He was thinking about a song he heard on the radio that morning. He was wondering if the aliens came in peace. He was imagining what his ex-wife would say when she heard about this. He was hungry. He was tired. He was amazed. He was scared. All of it, all at the same time, all tangled together like a knot that could never be untied. Xyrath pushed harder. He had broken stronger minds than this. He sent waves of terror into the human's consciousness, trying to drown everything else. The fear grew, just as Xyrath intended. But so did everything else. The human's love for his daughter became fierce and protective. His curiosity turned into a burning need to understand. His worry transformed into determination. And beneath it all, something rose up that Xyrath had never felt from any conquered species. Defiance. The human was not telepathic. He had no training. He had no idea what was happening to him. But somewhere in the chaos of his mind, Danny Ortega decided that he would not be controlled. He did not know how to fight back. He did not have any weapons that could hurt the thing inside his head. But he refused to surrender. And that refusal was enough. Xyrath felt the human's will push against him. It was not a psychic attack. It was something more basic than that. It was the simple, stubborn, irrational belief that he was his own person and no one could take that away from him. The commander tried to hold on. He had never retreated from a mental battle. He would not let some primitive creature defeat him. But the storm inside the human's mind was too strong. Every thought pulled in a different direction. Every emotion burned with impossible intensity. Every memory was vivid and alive and demanding attention. Xyrath screamed and pulled his consciousness back to his own body. He fell to the floor of his ship, his tentacles shaking, his 4 eyes wide with something his species rarely felt. Fear. "Commander!" His officers rushed to help him. "What happened? What did you see?" Xyrath looked up at them, still trembling. In 300 years, he had never been thrown out of a mind. He had never met a consciousness he could not control. Until now. "They are not what we expected," he whispered. "They are something else entirely. Something dangerous." Outside the ship, Danny Ortega picked up his dropped coffee cup with shaking hands. His head hurt. His heart was racing. But he was still standing. He was still himself. And somehow, he knew he had won. The Valkyrie did not give up after Commander Xyrath's failure. They had conquered too many worlds to stop because of one difficult human. Xyrath ordered his troops to spread out across Cedar Falls and try again. Maybe Danny Ortega was special. Maybe other humans would be easier to control. They were wrong. Lieutenant Kethra was one of the best mind readers in the fleet. She had broken the will of warriors and kings. She had made entire cities surrender without a single shot being fired. When she walked down the quiet streets of Cedar Falls, she felt confident that she would succeed where her commander had failed. She found her target sitting on a porch. Maria Santos was 73 years old. She had white hair, wrinkled hands, and a cup of tea that had gone cold because she was too busy watching the strange lights in the sky. She did not run when Kethra approached. She just looked at the alien with calm, curious eyes. "So, you are real," Maria said softly. "I always wondered." Kethra did not waste time with words. She pushed her mind forward, diving into the old woman's consciousness. She expected to find a simple mind, worn down by age, full of faded memories and quiet thoughts. Instead, she found a universe. Maria Santos had lived for 73 years, and she remembered all of it. Kethra saw Maria as a young girl, running through fields in Mexico, laughing as her brothers chased her. She saw Maria as a teenager, crying because a boy she liked did not like her back. She saw Maria as a young woman, standing at an altar in a white dress, looking at the man she would love for 40 years. The memories kept coming. Maria teaching children to read, year after year, watching them grow and leave and sometimes come back to thank her. Maria holding her husband's hand in a hospital room, telling him it was okay to let go, feeling her heart break into pieces that never fully healed. Maria learning to live alone, finding small joys in gardening and cooking and watching the sunset. Kethra tried to find something to grab, some weakness to exploit. But every memory was connected to every other memory. The sadness was mixed with joy. The pain was mixed with love. The fear was mixed with hope. It was all one thing, one enormous tapestry that could not be separated into threads, and Maria was not passive. She did not know what was happening, but she felt the alien presence in her mind. Instead of fighting it, she did something unexpected. She welcomed it. You want to see? Maria thought not with words, but with feeling. Then see. See what it means to be human. See what we carry inside us every day. The memories came faster. Maria's first heartbreak and her last dance with her husband. The face of every child she had ever taught. The taste of her mother's cooking. The sound of rain on a tin roof. The smell of flowers at her sister's funeral. The warmth of her grandson's hug. The loneliness of empty rooms. The peace of morning prayers. Kethra could not handle it. Her species lived in quiet minds, with thoughts that moved slowly and emotions that stayed in their proper places. Human emotions did not stay anywhere. They crashed and swirled and burned with an intensity that Kethra had never imagined possible. She pulled back, gasping, and looked at the old woman on the porch. Maria was smiling at her, a gentle smile that held no anger. "You are young," Maria said. "I can tell. You have not seen much yet. Someday you will understand. Living is hard, but it is also beautiful. The hard parts make the beautiful parts mean something." Kethra ran. Across town, Private Velthan was having an even worse experience. He had chosen what he thought was an easy target. A man sitting alone in a bar, drinking beer and watching a sports game. The man's name was Kevin Murphy. He was 45 years old, with a thick beard and tired eyes. Velthan entered Kevin's mind and immediately wished he had not. Kevin had been a soldier. He had seen war in places far from home, in deserts and mountains where death waited around every corner. Velthan saw it all. The friends Kevin had lost, the enemies he had killed, the long nights when he could not sleep because every time he closed his eyes, he was back in those terrible places. The trauma was overwhelming. Velthan had never felt pain like this. Human suffering was not quiet. It was loud and sharp and never-ending. Kevin carried his war with him every day and every moment, like a weight that never got lighter. But that was not what broke Velthan. What broke him was what existed alongside the pain. Kevin Murphy also remembered the day his daughter was born. He remembered the way his wife looked at him on their wedding day. He remembered teaching his son to ride a bicycle, running alongside him, ready to catch him if he fell. He remembered the taste of his father's barbecue and the sound of his mother's laughter. He remembered a moment, just last week, when he sat in his backyard and watched birds eating from a feeder he had built with his own hands, and he felt for just a moment that everything was going to be okay. How could one being hold so much darkness and so much light at the same time? How could Kevin Murphy survive his memories and still find reasons to smile? How could he carry all that weight and still get up every morning? Velthan did not understand. His mind was not built to understand. The Valkyrie processed emotions one at a time, in order, with careful control. Humans did not control anything. They just felt everything, all at once, and somehow kept moving forward. It was impossible. It was insane. It was the most terrifying thing Velton had ever witnessed. His telepathic abilities burned out trying to make sense of it. He collapsed on the street outside the bar, unable to form a coherent thought. Other Velkari soldiers found him hours later, still lying there, still staring at nothing. He never fully recovered. Reports flooded back to Commander Zyrith. Every soldier who tried to enter a human mind came back damaged. Some had temporary problems, like headaches and confusion. Others lost their telepathic abilities forever. A few simply stopped responding, their minds broken by what they had experienced. "This is not possible," Zyrith said, reading report after report. "They have no defenses. They have no training. How are they defeating us?" His science officer, a quiet female named Silva, offered a theory. "They are not defeating us, Commander. They are overwhelming us. Their minds are not organized like ours. They do not separate thoughts from emotions, past from present, fear from hope. Everything exists together all the time. When we enter their consciousness, we are exposed to all of it at once. Our minds cannot process that much input. Then we need to find another way," Zyrith said. "We cannot control them mentally. What other options do we have?" Silva was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that no Velkari had ever said before about a target species. "Perhaps we should consider leaving them alone." Zyrith stared at her. The idea was unthinkable. The Velkari did not retreat. They did not admit defeat. They were the masters of the galaxy. But looking at the reports, looking at his broken soldiers, Zyrith began to wonder if maybe the galaxy had room for more than one master. The meeting took place 3 months after the first contact in Cedar Falls. A space station was built in orbit around the moon, neutral ground where both species could meet safely. The construction took only 6 weeks. Humans worked fast when they wanted something done. Ambassador Patricia Vance was chosen to represent humanity. She was 62 years old, a former diplomat who had spent her career negotiating peace in some of the most difficult conflicts on Earth. She had white hair, kind eyes, and a voice that could calm angry rooms. More importantly, she understood that the best negotiations ended with both sides feeling respected. Commander Zyrith represented the Velkari. He arrived at the station alone, without guards or weapons. It was a sign of trust, or perhaps simply an acknowledgement that weapons were useless against humans anyway. They met in a round room with windows showing the stars. Patricia sat on one side of a simple table. Zyrith sat on the other, his tentacles folded carefully in his lap. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Patricia studied the alien commander, noting the way his 4 eyes never stayed still, always watching, always alert. Zyrith studied her in return, careful to keep his telepathic abilities completely shut down. Even from across the table, he could sense the storm inside her mind, and he had no desire to touch it. "Thank you for coming," Patricia said finally. "I know this must be difficult for you." Zyrith made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You have no idea. In 12,000 years, the Velkari have never requested peace with a species we intended to conquer. The High Council is furious. They may remove me from command when I return. Will you be punished? Perhaps. But that does not matter. What matters is that we end this conflict before more of my people are hurt." He paused. "And before we do something that makes your people hurt us even more." Patricia nodded slowly. She understood what he was not saying. The humans had discovered that they could use their minds as weapons. If the war continued, they would only get better at it. The Velkari faced the possibility of not just defeat but extinction. "We do not want to destroy you," she said. "We are not a species that seeks war. We have enough conflicts among ourselves." "Yes," Zyrith agreed. "We observed that. We thought it made you weak. What do you think now?" The commander was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost wondering. I think we were looking at you the wrong way. We saw your divisions and thought you were broken. We saw your short lives and thought you were insignificant. We saw your emotional intensity and thought you were unstable. He shook his head slowly. We did not understand that all of these things are connected. You fight among yourselves because you care deeply about different things. You live short lives, so every moment matters to you. You feel so intensely because you have no time to feel any other way. Patricia smiled. That is a more generous interpretation than we usually give ourselves, perhaps. But I have seen inside human minds. I have felt what you feel. It nearly destroyed me, but it also taught me something important. Xyrith leaned forward, his four eyes focusing on her face. You are not a primitive species. You are something we have never encountered before. You are a species that evolved to survive your own intensity. What do you mean? The Volcari learned to control our emotions because we had to. Our telepathic abilities meant that strong feelings would spread from one person to another, causing chaos. So we learned to be calm. We learned to think clearly. We built our civilization on mental discipline. He gestured toward Patricia with one tentacle. You had no telepathy. Your emotions stayed inside your own heads. So you did not need to control them. Instead, you learned to survive them. You learned to carry grief and joy at the same time. You learned to feel fear without being paralyzed by it. You learned to love deeply, even though you knew loss was inevitable. Patricia felt tears forming in her eyes. She had never thought about her species this way. She had always seen human emotions as messy, complicated, often painful. But Xyrith was describing them as a strength, a survival mechanism that had made humanity unique in the galaxy. Your minds are not chaos, Xyrith continued. They are storms, yes, but storms have patterns. You have learned to ride those patterns, to find meaning in the chaos, to build lives and families and societies in the middle of constant emotional turmoil. It is the most impressive thing I have ever witnessed. Then, why did you try to conquer us? The question hung in the air. Xyrith closed his eyes for a moment, and Patricia sensed something she had not expected from an alien conqueror. Shame. Because we did not look closely enough, he said quietly. We saw what we expected to see. A primitive species. An easy target. We did not stop to consider that there might be something valuable in the way you live. Something we could learn from instead of destroy. Patricia reached across the table and touched his tentacle gently. It was a human gesture, one that might mean nothing to a Volcari. But Xyrith seemed to understand. He did not pull away. We want to withdraw from your solar system, he said. Completely and permanently. We will mark your species as protected in our records. No Volcari will ever try to conquer you again. And in exchange, nothing. Xyrith opened his eyes. We have taken enough from the galaxy. Perhaps it is time we learn to give something back. Your species has reminded us that there are many ways to be strong, many ways to survive. We need to think about what that means for our own civilization. The treaty was signed that day. Simple words on paper, but they changed the course of history. The Volcari fleet departed within a week, leaving behind only a small diplomatic station where the two species could continue to talk. Before he left, Xyrith made one final entry in his personal log. The humans are not what we thought they were, he wrote. They are not primitive or weak or unstable. They are survivors of a different kind, creatures who have learned to live inside their own storms. They feel everything, all the time, and they would not have it any other way. This makes them dangerous, yes, but it also makes them beautiful. I do not know what the future holds for the Volcari. Our way of life has been challenged by these strange beings from a small blue planet. But I think that challenge may be the best thing that ever happened to us. We have been conquerors for too long. Perhaps it is time to become something else. Perhaps it is time to learn from the humans, to feel more deeply, to live more fully, to embrace the storm instead of hiding from it. On Earth, life returned to normal. The alien invasion became history, then legend, then a story people told their children. But something had changed. Humanity knew now that they were not alone in the universe. They knew that their greatest weakness was also their greatest strength. They knew that their chaos, their emotions, their beautiful and terrible intensity was something precious. That Danny Ortega went back to his job at the power plant. He hugged his daughter a little tighter every night. Maria Santos kept sitting on her porch, watching the stars, wondering what other wonders existed in the endless darkness. Kevin Murphy fed his birds each morning and thought about all the things he had survived. They were human. They felt everything. And that was exactly as it should be. The stars waited above them, full of mysteries and dangers and possibilities. Someday, humanity would venture out to meet them. When they did, they would carry their storms with them, their love and grief, and hope and fear, their endless capacity to feel and survive and keep moving forward. No force in the galaxy could stop that dot. No force in the galaxy would ever want to try. The Valkyrie High Council was not happy with Commander Zyrith. They sent him angry messages demanding to know why the invasion had stalled. Earth was supposed to be an easy target. 12,000 years of conquest had taught the Valkyrie that primitive species could not resist mental domination. Yet here was Zyrith, stuck in orbit around a planet he could not take, losing soldiers to creatures that had no telepathic abilities at all. Send more troops, the council ordered. Overwhelm them with numbers. Zyrith obeyed, though he knew it would not work. 200 more Valkyrie soldiers arrived from the nearest colony world. They were fresh and confident, certain that the stories about human minds were exaggerated. They learned the truth the hard way. The attack came on a Saturday morning in Chicago. The humans had known it was coming. Their scientists had detected the new ships entering orbit, and they had prepared. When the Valkyrie landing craft touched down in Grant Park, 10,000 trained volunteers were waiting. The aliens emerged from their ships with their minds open, ready to project fear into the crowd. Instead, they ran straight into a wall of human emotion. The volunteers had been practicing for weeks. They stood together, holding hands, remembering everything. First loves and last goodbyes. The births of children and the deaths of parents. Moments of triumph when they won. Moments of despair when they lost. Weddings and funerals. Graduations and failures. Kindnesses received and wrongs endured. Every feeling a human could feel, all of it summoned at once and held in place by pure determination. The Valkyrie screamed. Lieutenant Kethra was among them. She had recovered somewhat from her encounter with Maria Santos, though she still had nightmares about the old woman's endless memories. Now she faced 10,000 humans doing the same thing deliberately, and it was so much worse that she felt a teenage boy's heartbreak when his first girlfriend left him. She felt a middle-aged woman's grief for her mother, who had died of cancer. She felt a young man's terror during his first day at a new job. She felt an elderly man's quiet satisfaction watching his grandchildren play. She felt anger and joy and fear and hope and love and hate and loneliness and connection and every other emotion that humans experienced in their short, intense lives. And then she felt them push back. The humans had learned something important in their training. They could not just defend against the Valkyrie. They could attack. By deliberately projecting their memories outward. By wanting the aliens to feel what they felt. They could turn the mental connection into a weapon. 10,000 minds reached out through the telepathic links that the Valkyrie had opened. 10,000 lifetimes of human experience flooded into the alien consciousness. It was not an attack in any traditional sense. It was simply sharing. the same way Maria Santos had shared her memories with Kethra. But to the Valkyrie, it might as well have been a bomb. Kethra collapsed. So did every other Valkyrie soldier in the park. Their ships, which were controlled by telepathic links to their crews, lost power and crashed. In less than 5 minutes, the invasion force was completely disabled. The humans cheered. They hugged each other. Some of them cried, overwhelmed by the emotions they had deliberately summoned. But they were alive. They had won. Commander Zereth watched from orbit, unable to believe what he was seeing. His second wave, his best soldiers, defeated without a single human weapon being fired. The creatures below had used nothing but their minds. Minds that should have been weak and vulnerable, but instead were the most dangerous things Zereth had ever encountered. "We have to retreat," his science officer said quietly. "There is no victory here, only different levels of defeat." Zereth wanted to argue. His pride demanded that he fight on, that he find some way to win. But he was not a fool. He could see the truth clearly now. The humans were not weak. They were not primitive. They were something far more dangerous. They were survivors. Everything about human existence was hard. They lived short lives in fragile bodies on a planet that tried to kill them with storms and earthquakes and disease. They fought wars against each other. They broke each other's hearts. They lost the people they loved and had to keep living anyway. Every human carried enough pain to destroy a Valkyrie mind, but they also carried joy. They found love in the middle of chaos. They built families and communities and civilizations. They created art and music and stories that celebrated their strange, difficult, beautiful existence. They felt everything so deeply, and somehow they used that depth to make their lives meaningful. Zereth finally understood why his soldiers had failed. The Valkyrie had tried to use fear as a weapon, but humans had lived with fear every day of their lives. They knew fear like an old friend. It could not control them because they had already learned to carry it. Alongside everything else, a message arrived from the High Council. They demanded answers. They demanded results. They threatened Zereth with punishment if he did not complete the invasion. Zereth read the message twice, then deleted it. "Send a signal to the humans," he told his communication officer. "Tell them we wish to negotiate." "Negotiate?" The officer was shocked. "Commander, the Council will never approve. We do not negotiate with lesser species." "The humans are not a lesser species," Zereth said quietly. "I am not sure they ever were. I think we simply did not understand what we were looking at." He stared at the blue planet below, thinking about all the minds that swirled and stormed on its surface. Billions of humans, each one carrying a hurricane of emotion that would destroy any Valkyrie who tried to enter it. They were chaos made flesh. They were impossible. They were magnificent. "Send the message," Zereth repeated. "We are done fighting. Now we must find another way." The communication officer hesitated, then obeyed. The message went out across all frequencies, translated into every human language. The Valkyrie wished to talk. The war, such as it was over, but something else was beginning. A new chapter in galactic history. The moment when the great conquerors met the one species they could not conquer and had to face a simple truth. Some creatures were not meant to be controlled. Some storms were not meant to be calmed. Some minds held too much life to ever be dominated. Humanity was all of these things and more. The world found out about the aliens within 2 days. Someone in Cedar Falls had recorded the ships with their phone. Someone else had seen the Valkyrie walking through the streets. The video spread across the internet faster than any government could stop them. At first, people panicked. There were riots in some cities. Churches filled with people praying for salvation. Stock markets crashed. Some families packed their cars and drove to the mountains, hoping to hide from the invasion. But humans are strange creatures. They panic quickly, and then they adapt. Within a week, the panic had turned into something else. Curiosity, determination, and most surprising of all, anger. The governments of the world met in emergency sessions. Generals planned military strikes. Scientists studied the alien ships from a distance, trying to understand their technology. Everyone prepared for war, but one group of scientists was looking at a different question. They wanted to know why the aliens had failed in Cedar Falls. Every person who had been attacked by the Valkyrie had survived. More than that, some of them reported that their attackers had seemed hurt, confused, even afraid. What had happened? Dr. Lisa Wang led the research team at MIT. She was a neurologist, someone who studied how the brain worked. When she heard the reports from Cedar Falls, she immediately asked to interview the survivors. Danny Ortega was her first subject. He sat in her office, still looking tired, still not quite believing what had happened to him. "Tell me exactly what you felt," Lisa said, her pen ready to write notes. Danny struggled to find the words. "It was like something pushed into my head. Not through my ears or my eyes. Just straight into my thoughts. And it was trying to make me scared. It wanted me to panic, but you did not panic." "I was scared," Danny admitted. "Really scared. But I was also thinking about my daughter. About how I had to get home to her. About how I could not let anything stop me from seeing her again. And I was curious too, you know. I wanted to understand what was happening. And I was angry that something was trying to control me." He paused. "Is that weird? Feeling all those things at once?" Lisa smiled. "No, Danny, that is perfectly normal. That is what makes you human." She interviewed more survivors. Maria Santos described welcoming the alien presence, showing it everything she had experienced in her long life. Kevin Murphy talked about his memories of war mixing with memories of his family, creating a storm of emotion that even he could barely handle. Everyone had a similar story. The aliens had tried to grab their fear and use it against them. But human fear was never alone. It was always connected to love, hope, anger, curiosity, and 100 other feelings. Lisa started to understand. She made calls to other scientists. She ran computer simulations. She studied everything she could find about telepathy and consciousness and emotional processing. 2 weeks after the Cedar Falls incident, she stood in front of the United Nations General Assembly and presented her findings. "The Valkyrie are telepaths," she explained, showing diagrams on a large screen. "They attack by entering the mind and amplifying fear. This has worked on every other species they have encountered. But human consciousness is different. Our brains did not evolve for telepathy. We have no natural defenses against mental intrusion." The room was silent, confused. If humans had no defenses, why had they survived? "Here is the key," Lisa continued. "We have no defenses because we do not need them. Our minds are already too complex for the Valkyrie to control. We feel many emotions simultaneously. We hold contradictory thoughts at the same time. We remember our past while living in the present, while imagining the future. All of this happens constantly, without pause, without organization." She clicked to a new slide, showing a comparison between Valkyrie and human brain activity. The Valkyrie mind is like a calm lake. Thoughts move slowly across the surface. Emotions are experienced one at a time. This makes telepathy possible. They can reach into that calm water and create ripples wherever they want. She clicked again. The human mind is like a hurricane. Thoughts and emotions crash together in every direction. There is no calm surface. There is no control point. When the Valkyrie try to create ripples, they are swept away by the storm that already exists inside us. A murmur went through the assembly. Hope began to replace fear on many faces. "Can this be used as a weapon?" the American representative asked. Lisa nodded slowly. "I believe so. The Valkyrie are vulnerable to intense emotional experiences. When they enter our minds, they experience what we experience. If we can learn to deliberately create powerful emotional storms, we can hurt them, perhaps even destroy them." The training program began immediately. Volunteers from every country were brought to special facilities. Psychologists taught them techniques for recalling their most intense memories on demand. They practiced remembering their greatest joys and their deepest sorrows, their proudest moments and their worst failures, all at the same time. It was not easy. Many people found it painful to deliberately summon difficult memories. Some could not handle the emotional intensity and had to stop. But many others pushed through. They learned to turn their own minds into weapons. A woman named Rosa Delgado became one of the best. She was 40 years old, a mother of 3, a survivor of domestic violence who had rebuilt her life from nothing. When she remembered everything at once, her mind became a supernova of feeling. Love for her children, hatred for her ex-husband, pride in her own strength, fear of the past, hope for the future, gratitude for every small kindness she had ever received. During a test, a captured Valkyrie soldier tried to enter her mind. He lasted less than 3 seconds before collapsing, his telepathic abilities completely destroyed. How did that feel? The scientists asked Rosa. She thought for a moment, then smiled. It felt like being fully alive. Word spread among the humans. They were not helpless. They were not weak. The very thing that made their lives difficult, the chaos of constant emotion, was also what made them strong. The aliens had come to conquer them, but they had chosen the wrong species. Commander Zareth watched the human broadcasts from his ship. He saw the training programs. He saw the volunteers. He saw the determination in their eyes. "They are learning to use their minds against us," his science officer reported. "Our soldiers cannot compete. The humans are too strong." Zareth was quiet for a long time. He had conquered 17 species. He had never lost. But as he watched the humans prepare for battle, he felt something cold settle in his heart. They were not going to win this war. The only question now was how badly they would lose.